Okay, got it.
Visiting today with Dr. Temple Grandin, one of our favorite guests here on the Radio Oklahoma Ag Network, because she loves talking about skilled trade. And we had a recent ag mechanics show at the Oklahoma Youth Expo this year with over 150 entrants of just ag mechanics. These are kids building trailers, kids building pins, kids building welding equipment, all kinds of good stuff. So talk to us a little bit about why you find that so important.
I think it's very important. I've been involved with the cattle industry for 50 years and working out with the big meat packing plants. I'm now a professor of animal science at Colorado State and designed like the front end of all the Cargill beef plants, the yards, the chutes, and the center track restrainer system. You can look that up on Beef Plant Video Tour. And in the 80s and the early 90s, I was living out on construction sites with the crews. And the thing that's happened is the people that I worked with on some of this machinery, they're retiring now. And one of the big problems is these shops are not getting replaced. And I think it's very serious. And I had a gigantic wake-up call in 2019, shortly before COVID. I visited a poultry processing plant and a pork processing plant, actually two pork and one poultry, state-of-the-art, brand new factories. And all the equipment was imported from Holland. And I think this gets back to us taking out skilled trades. Beef, we still know how to build. I just went into the brand new Grand Island plant, talked to some of the shop people there. In fact, I was hugging a construction worker up there. He was like, older. And we discussed the problem with the not getting replaced. But the beef, what saved that is the same shop that built a lot of that equipment also does oil field.
Okay.
And so you had people coming and doing welding. And so I didn't realize how serious this problem was because beef's mainly been the thing I work on. We still know how to build beef.
Sure.
But on pork and poultry, I was just shocked. And I was going around there looking at nameplates. And then I started investigating other things that have nothing to do with the meat industry. And I got more and more shocked. I went out to the Steve Jobs Theater, structural glass walls, no columns, carbon fiber roof. The structural glass walls are from Italy and Germany. Carbon fiber roof was from Dubai. All right, this is a little thing I downloaded off the internet. It's kind of this is radio, that's right. You won't be able to see that. You can edit this out. I forgot, now I'm rustling the paper, putting it away. Okay, then I started researching more stuff. And I found out that the state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine is made in Holland. The very biggest state-of-the-art for the tiniest little chips. And it was based on a US technology, but that goes back to skilled trades because I went on the website and here's a repairman there with little pliers and stuff fixing the machine. There's lots of skilled trade stuff.
Sure.
The fabric for the Mars lander parachute is from the United Kingdom, woven on high-tech European looms. I managed to get into a webpage to see the factory, and I managed to get some nameplates off of some machines. So I think we're getting into a very serious issue here with skill loss. And I've got a new book coming out on visual thinking, because a lot of the people I worked with at these shops, they're the kid that can't do algebra, has a lot of problems with higher math, but can build just anything.
Yeah.
I worked with those people. Then you have your mathematical minds, your more typical engineers. And what I found in working out on these construction projects is that I call it the clever engineering department. My kind of mind builds all the clever mechanical devices. And the degreed engineer will do power, water, boilers, and refrigeration. And we're doing that kind of engineering. But we're losing what I call the clever engineering department. And I've got a major new book coming out on visual thinking by Temple Grandin. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. And I'm going to be discussing this issue. And I think we've got some very serious issues here. And what's happening to the people that ought to be the new clever engineers, they're playing video games in the basement because they never got a chance to take welding.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You're a visual thinker, but how do we encourage our young kids, especially those ag kids that are going through FFA, starting young in 4-H, to really kind of hone in on being, because there's so many people that put all the emphasis on test taking, but that's not where it's at.
No, it's not. Now, fortunately, one of the older guys I'm working with is he's helping out a younger guy that learned welding in the oil patch. But the other thing, you have a guy that might be just building corrals and and some trailers and stuff like that. But to get them into the factories, this is where you need a contact.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens with these shops, and I've seen this happen over, they build some little thing and the factory likes it. Same thing with the car industry. Factory likes it and then build more stuff. But somebody has to be that first connection to take the guy who might be just building fencing now
Mm-hmm.
and start up the ladder to something a bit more complex than that. But I've watched small shops grow because I've been in the industry so long, and they're retiring out now. And I have to say the 2 pork plants and the poultry plant, I was just shocked by the time I got through the poultry plant. I was about screaming as I went around looking at nameplates on machinery.
Well, I know you visited Oklahoma at a VOTEC school not too
Yes,
long
I
ago.
did. Yes,
So
I
tell us
did.
some of the things that you saw there that you were excited about.
Well, I think it's really good that we're getting kids interested in these things. I also went back and looked at the corrals I had designed years ago for Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. All the gates were still good. That made me happy. Because that's like
Absolutely.
over 35. That's over 35 years old. So that made me real happy. But there's a tendency to think, well, if you don't go to college, you're not smart. And
Mhm.
one of the things that motivated me when I did the dipping vat projects that are shown in the HBO movie is I wanted to prove to people it's not stupid.
Yeah.
That I really wanted to prove that. And the way I sold jobs was I showed off my drawings.
Mhm.
I showed my drawings off. And you have to show the drawings to the right people, not the HR department.
Sure.
You got to show the drawings to the engineering department. I worked with one guy. He took a 1-semester community college class in drafting. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s. Showed up, I think, a homework assignment for a water valve to an engineer, and then was laying out beef plants.
Mhm.
But he showed it to an engineer. He didn't show it to HR. You see, that's an example of showing off work. And a good
Yeah.
20% of the people I worked with either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. And owning, small shops, big shops.
How do you expose, how do you recommend exposing kids that are younger that may have, like you said, they may not be good at math, but is it important to kind of expose them to different traits and try to figure out what they're good at and what they like?
Well, when I was in undergraduate, when I was in elementary school, I took woodworking, art, and sewing. I loved all of those. I hated cooking. and how is a kid going to find out they like tools if they don't use them? I'm horrified at the amount of kids growing up today in elementary school that have never used tools.
Mhm.
I was using hammer, screwdriver, and pliers by 2nd grade, and I was taught how to use them safely.
Sure.
I had a kid in my class last semester who had never measured anything with a ruler.
Mhm.
We've got kids growing up totally removed from the world of the practical. So let's get kids out doing stuff, like just get a bunch of old lumber and let them take some forklift pallets apart and make stuff out of it.
Yeah.
Kids, stuff that we did in my generation, that was just normal goofing around outside. Kids aren't doing that.
Right.
You have to be exposed. I've
Sure.
looked into career development for a lot of people. Let's take Michelangelo.
Okay.
He was a dirty little slob, dropped out of school at age 12, but he was exposed to great art. Every church was doing it, and he grew up with stone cutting tools.
Mhm.
You see, that's the exposure. Then a mentor will come along and they
Yep.
start seeing your work. So it starts with exposure and then mentoring. So people have asked me, what would I do if I could fix the schools? I want to put hands-on classes back, especially starting in elementary school, not high school, elementary school. All right.
Well, that's why I've just
Theater.
loved this ag mechanics class, because a lot of people that go into FFA think it's only about livestock showing or livestock judging. But this gives these kids an opportunity to work with their ag teachers and get hands-on. They learn how to weld, they learn how to build, and they get to see their finished product just like you would with your show calf, except you're building a trailer.
Exactly. You see, and then you need to make the jump from maybe building some trailers and some fencing to industry. And that's where you have to get that contact to get that first job. Okay, so they bring you in there to weld some rail in a beef plant, let's say. You did really good on that. And then they go, well, that guy did good work. Let's bring him in and have him build this thing. Then gradually they're building more and more complicated stuff in the factory. And then they end up designing the whole factory. I've been in this industry 50 years. I've seen this.
And they didn't have to be good at math or algebra.
They have to just have their old-fashioned 50s, 6th grade math.
Yep.
They do have to have that. Find the area of the circle, angles. Yeah, there's some I must say 1950s sixth grade math, which I know how to do. They have to have that. But I've talked to a lot of these guys and they can't do algebra. And so now they get screened out. And we need their skills. And what's happened is the verbal thinkers have taken over the schools. Let's talk about different thinking. And I actually discussed that some in my book, The Autistic Brain. There's science behind different kinds of thinking. I'm what's called an object visualizer. Everything I think about is a photorealistic picture.
Yeah.
So what kind of stuff are object visualizers good at? Art, photography, working with animals, and mechanics, building things, mechanics. Then you have the visual spatial, more mathematical thinker. They don't think in pictures. They think kind of in abstractions and patterns. They visualize patterns. These are your regular university trained engineers.
Sure.
So they'll do the boilers and refrigeration, but they'll never make the packaging machine, for example.
Right.
And then you have the word thinkers, just the verbal thinkers. And verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize and leave out all the details. My kind of mind keeps too many details. And when we work together, we have just about the right amount of details.
Yes.
And I'm concerned that we're screening out, especially the object visualizers, the ones that are like me, because I can't do abstract math. And we're screening out like good veterinarians. And I said, well, you have to have algebra for dosing. I go, no, you don't. You have to memorize like 10 formulas, cookbook it. That's all you need for dosing. That's like finding the area of a circle. I know how to do that. You just memorize that.
Well, and we've missed out. You know, we're missing out on plumbers, electricians.
Well, that's the problem.
All of them are gone.
Electricians.
Yep.
We have a huge shortage, and these jobs are not going away. Computers are not going to make wiring go away or plumbing go away. I don't know. I don't think I want to use a computer for plumbing.
No, or to build your house, right? Because you've got roofers and people that are going into construction that know how to do things like that. And you have to have literally, the housing market is insane right now.
Oh, I know.
Because people cannot find enough skilled workers.
Well, and some of the most fun stuff I ever did was in construction. And we'd sit around the job trailer and discuss how to build things. Then we'd also talk about how stupid the suits were. And now I'm realizing that it's different kinds of thinking. You see, when I was doing that kind of stuff, I didn't know that my visual thinking was different than maybe the suits. Because what happens in a lot of startup companies is at the point where they need to hire a verbal thinker to get some organization. My grandfather was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. MIT trained mathematical engineer working with a visual thinking weird guy who had a crazy idea. The invention was stolen. This is where he needed a suit. He needed a verbal lawyer that would have said, don't rent your thing to the Bendix Corporation. They're going to just steal it.
Right.
And they did. And the ripoff was in every plane during World War II.
Yeah. So it really takes all kinds of good thinkers. But, in school, sometimes I feel like kids that don't necessarily learn like the majority of kids learn, it's a lot harder for them. And they may be labeled as like, they may behave bad or, they're acting out. But I've heard you say it's probably because they're bored.
Well, they're bored. A lot of it's they're bored. And I get asked all the time, how do you figure out what kind of a thinker a kid is? Well, you don't know when they're 3.
Right.
Now that starts to show up like 2nd and 3rd grade. That's when it started to really show up. I had art ability. My mother expanded that. I'd spend hours making little bird kites. And that's why I did this other book called Calling All Minds. I'd spend hours tinkering with some heavy paper to make a little bird kite I could fly behind my trike.
Yeah.
And kids don't tinker today.
Right.
And I did, my first bird kites did not work. I had to experiment with them. And kids are just not doing that.
No. Well, I have twins, and I've got one that's very musical, loves all things music, like can play by ear, hear things like that. But then I've got another one that loves Legos, likes to build Lego sets, likes to play sports.
And how old is the Lego builder?
They're twins that are 8. They're almost 9.
Okay. Have they ever been using tools?
Yes, they actually have a really good grandparent that has a farm. So They, my dad's actually tried to organize his gates like you've set up, and they think they're a pretty big deal when they go out and organize the horses, put them in different pens, make sure those gates are working both ways. They want to make sure the donkey's not in with the cattle. All those things make them feel like a pretty big
But
deal.
are they actually learning to use tools? They're at the age where they need to start to learn to make things with tools.
Yeah. London loves clippers. Clippers are her favorite thing. We have to tell her to be careful what she's clipping, but she likes things like pliers, hammers, clippers. She likes trimmers. Those kinds of things are what they like to get out and mess with at the farm.
Well, I used to like to get out and just make stuff, like make parachutes out of a scarf. And then I spent, and that's in my book, Calling All Minds, is a kid's project book. Take an old scarf and make a parachute, and then put a weight on it, and then to make the strings open up better, I made a crossbar with coat hanger. I was in second grade doing this. I can remember my little kid's hand couldn't squeeze the pliers, and I could make a dent in the coat hanger, and then I had to bend it to
back and forth until it'll eventually break.
Until it broke. That's exactly what I did. I had to do that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your work with animals, because you don't just work with cattle. You actually have had taught me some really great things about how to train dogs. People don't sometimes know that about you.
Well, the first thing is let's say you have a behavior problem with the animal. The verbal mind tends to overgeneralize, and they'll say, what do I do with an autistic kid? I don't even know what the age is. If it's 3 years old, I've got to give you my early intervention talk.
Right.
What did the horse or the dog or whatever it is do that you're trying to correct? I've got to get enough questions asked where I can make a video kind of in my head of what the dog did, what's motivating what it did. And also, an animal lives in a sensory-based world. What is the animal seeing, smelling, hearing? Dogs are really into smell, and I see people yanking dogs away when they want to smell a tray.
Right.
Well, the dogs isn't allowed to do the stuff that dogs want to do.
Sure.
And I think a lot of dogs today are terrified of everything because they don't get to experience enough stuff.
And cattle kind of the same way. The way you advise people to set up their barns, don't put a whole bunch of stuff in there that's going to make them scared to death to go in there.
Well, and they get scared of stuff that is novel. I just, my student Dennis Wilson just did some research at a small plant on how shadows change during the day, where they go across the chutes. And that can really make a big problem. I was just out visiting a plant, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, it worked fine. And 3:30 in the afternoon, there's a giant shadow in the crowd pen, and it was just terrible.
Well, I was going to ask you though, obviously you want to have good stewardship of the land and the cattle, but you have to put cattle through the working chute. And
yes, you do.
Shots are never fun for anybody. Branding is never fun for anybody. But I've heard you say it's important not to give that calf a traumatic event while they're in the chute. But how do you avoid, because branding's it's just not fun.
Well, branding is bad, but let's make sure that branding is not their first experience in the corrals. Okay. Let's just walk them in there, feed them, walk them through the chute. All the fear of going through the chute's worse than shots are. Yeah, branding. They don't forget that.
No. Branding, dehorning, all of those things are sometimes necessary, but it's almost impossible for it not to be a bad experience.
Well, but the thing that's important is don't have the first experience in the chute a bad experience. So if you just walk them through it.
Okay.
Feed them after you've walked them through it.
And what about weaning? What's the best way to wean?
Well, I think some kind of more gradual weaning, fence line weaning. More and more people are doing that. So you're gradually moving them away from the cow. The calves are more interested in being near her than they are from drinking from her. So
right, just to have them.
But
I feel like we've covered all the gamut of awesome things that we could talk about today. But when will your new book be out?
It's going to be out in October, but they're taking pre-orders. It's called Visual Thinking, Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. And it's going to really emphasize a lot of the stuff I talked about, why businesses need to be concerned about this. That our educational system is screening out, especially the object visualizers like me. I've often thought, I don't think I could graduate from high school in California with all the draconian algebra requirements. And then they're requiring algebra to take auto shop or to take welding. I've seen that as a barrier. Now, if you're going to do chemistry, yes, you have to have algebra.
Sure.
People that are good at algebra are often good at programming. I tried programming and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I at least got exposed to it. So,
well, I think it's like you're a great example too of what it looks like to be successful with your mind. And I think we really have to have more people celebrating that.
Well, this is the problem because I went in this one place. I call it Willy Wonka in stainless steel. This is a guy that started out washing equipment in a plant, gravitated over to maintenance. Next thing you know, built this big factory, multi-billion-dollar business. Plus, he has a corporate jet, and barely graduated from high school. And we had a long discussion of what his labels would have been: oppositional defiant, juvenile delinquent, autistic, dyslexic, you name it, he would have been it. And he's in his 70s, and I can't go into any details what he does because the people that I'm talking about are not declared. Now, Elon Musk is declared. I've always thought he was autistic.
And look at him now.
That's right. He just bought Twitter or something. That's an example of Einstein was probably autistic. You know, the thing I'm asking some of our great geniuses of the past, where would they be in today's educational system? I think we've got some real things to worry about and think about.
Well, Dr. Grandin, thank you so much for visiting with us today.
It was great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to sign off.